I love states' rights, Scott. Our forefathers were smart. But now I'm wondering, were we wrong? I have no idea how to interpret what the federal government said yesterday and how that's going to be implemented in states. In fact, looking at the way the different states have approached the distribution up to this point, I have no idea which one is doing well and what the bottlenecks are in the other ones. Are we going to make any progress based on that recommendation yesterday, Scott?
Well, I think this gives states more flexibility to get out the supply. I think states were tying themselves into knots trying to adhere to a very narrow criteria, strict criteria that made it difficult for them to distribute it in an efficient way. Look, I agree with leaving it up to states in terms of how they determine distribution. And different states have different resources available to them, so they're going to be distributing it differently. Some states will turn to big box pharmacies. Some states will turn to their local counties, which might have good infrastructure, good public health infrastructure. I think what we should have tried to have a more uniform approach is on eligibility. We said on this show it's going to seem unfair to a lot of Americans because you'll hear from a relative in one state who will have access to the vaccine and a comparable person in another state won't, because the states were going to set up very different criteria. And that's, in fact, what's happened. I think there's no reason why we shouldn't have a uniform approach to how we determine eligibility as we move across states. And I think that broadening it is going to create a more uniform structure. The excess demand really is among senior citizens. That's where there's really intense demand to get vaccinated. I think opening it up to 65 and above is very prudent. And I would expect we're going to work off that demand relatively quickly. There's probably about 45 million senior citizens in this country that really want to get vaccinated very badly, maybe less than that. And I think we should focus the resources there initially, given the fact that they're at excess risk from the disease.
Are we just going to have different people? We're just going to have a different group of people eligible to get it that can't get it?
Well, I think there's still going to be some heterogeneity because, that once you move beyond the senior population, it's easy to say, well, 65 and above is eligible. And that could be a uniform standard across the whole country. And I don't know why we don't try to move towards that. But then once you get below that, there's going to be pockets of eligibility as well among people who have certain comorbid conditions, because that was the additional guidance that they put out. Right. So there'll still be some heterogeneity across states.
I just meant, Scott, that right now, for example, in New Jersey, it was 1A, and you can look at who's eligible, and then you look at which dates they ask you to pick to get the vaccination, and the very furthest out date says, call back, log in later, and none of these are available. So now you're going to go from people that were frontline workers that can't get the vaccine because none of the dates are open, to anyone 65. I don't know if Murphy's going to do this. We're going to have him on today, and we'll see whether he says he's going to change it to that. But you're just switching one group of people who can't get the vaccine on any of the dates offered to another group of people that still can't get the vaccine on the dates offered.
Yeah, look, New Jersey seems to be having some unique challenges on the distribution side. So there's a difference between states that aren't expanding eligibility, like New York was in that camp about a week ago, and states that are still having trouble distributing through the points that they've made vaccine available. And I would put New Jersey in that bucket. Big state, large population, but they are having challenges distributing the vaccine. So they need to open up more distribution points. And this gets to the other side of the coin, which is probably pushing out more of this vaccine through retailers, going to Walmart, going to Target, going to CVS and Walgreens and the big box pharmacies, and local pharmacies as well, and starting to push vaccine out through that channel so you open up more points of distribution. And that also allows you to create scheduling systems where you could see where the demand is, and the federal government can make more supply available based on booked appointments, based on demonstrated demand through appointments.
Doug?
Scott, I'm sorry, could you just be a little more specific in the challenges New Jersey's facing because of distribution? Simply because we have the governor on, we can ask him about it.
Well, look, I think one of the challenges is they've stuck to this criteria narrowly. So you had to be a healthcare worker or a first responder. And so they pursued those narrow criteria, and they stayed in 1A for an extended period of time. But they're also not pushing it out through a lot of different distribution points. There are some local clinics. If you go on to the websites in New Jersey, and I have, within a county, there'll be 3 or 4 clinics that might be offering it. They're putting it out through ShopRite. They haven't opened up a lot of distribution points. So I think as they expand eligibility to 65 and above, which they probably will, they're going to need to push this out through more retail points, more community points. They can't just open up big vaccination centers in Giant Stadium and expect 70-year-old people to drive out and line up outside a large stadium. They have to offer this in the community in places where people are accustomed to getting their health care, like a pharmacy.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.